We even have our drummer. Thank you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar Dada Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar Dada Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Did we do 34? 34. Okay. Page 563. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 16th day of August 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are still in chapter 13, Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. Text 34 at the bottom of page 563. Yata prakashayati eka kritsnam lokam imam ravihi chaitram chaitri tata kritsnam prakashayati bharata yata prakashayatyeka kritsnam lokam imam ravihi chaitram chaitri tata kritsnam prakashayati bharata yata prakashayatyeka kritsnam lokam imam ravihi chaitram chaitri tata kritsnam prakashayati bharata yata prakashayatyeka kritsnam lokam imam ravihi Chaitram Chaitri Tata Kritshnam Prakashiyati Bharata Yata Prakashiyatyeka Kritshnam Lokamimam Ravihi Chaitram Chaitri Tata Kritshnam Prakashiyati Bharata Yata Prakashiyatyeka Kritshnam Lokamimam Ravihi Chaitram Chaitri Tata Kritshnam Prakashiyati Bharata Yata Prakashiyatyeka Kritshnam Lokamimam Ravihi Chaitram Chaitri Tata Kritshnam Prakashiyati Bharata. Ishtadev. Yata Prakashiyatyeka Kritshnam Lokamimam Ravihi Chaitram Chaitri Tata Kritshnam Prakashiyati Bharata. Now Ravi's going to chant. This is the one verse in the Gita, his name is in there. So go ahead. Yata Prakashiyatyeka Chitram Lokam Miramhi Chaitram Chaitri Tata Kritshnam Prakashiyati Bharata. Do you want to try? You don't have to. Okay. So I'll just read the word by word so you can follow along. Yata as Prakashiyati illuminates, Ekaha one, Kritshnam the whole, Lokam universe, Imam this, Ravihi sun, Chaitram this body, Chaitri the soul, Tata similarly, Kritshnam all, Prakashiyati illuminates Bharata, O son of Bharat. Translation. Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, O son of Bharata, as the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity, one within the body, illuminate the entire body by consciousness. Purport. There are various theories regarding consciousness. Here in the Bhagavad Gita, the example of the sun and the sunshine is given. As the sun is situated in one place, but is illuminating the whole universe, so a small particle of spirit soul, although situated in the heart of this body, is illuminating the whole body by consciousness. Thus consciousness is the proof of the presence of the soul, as sunshine or light is the proof of the presence of the sun. When the soul is present in the body, there is consciousness all over the body, and as soon as the soul has passed from the body, there is no more consciousness. This can be easily understood by any intelligent man. Therefore, consciousness is not a product of the combinations of matter. It is the symptom of the living entity. The consciousness of the living entity, although qualitatively one with the supreme consciousness, is not supreme, because the consciousness of one particular body does not share that of another body. But the supersoul, which is situated in all bodies as the friend of the individual soul, is conscious of all bodies. That is the difference between the supreme consciousness and the individual consciousness. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. Now just one note, because we have some newcomers here. Prabhupada's native tongue was Bengali. He was raised in Calcutta, and the British were ruling in India at that time, British Raj, early 20th century and before. And he learned English from English teachers from England. And at that time, even until very recently, the common usage was to have male pronouns indicating everybody. Everyone should try to purify his consciousness and go back to God. But that doesn't mean it doesn't pertain to women. You understand? It's just a way of speaking. That was his language. So when he says any man can understand this, it means any human being. I just let you know. Om Jnanatimbarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Shri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So, in this verse, Krishna is giving a nice analogy so that we can understand how the soul is present in the body, and similar to the way that the sun is present in the sky. We're all familiar with how the sun, even before it comes up, we can see the sun is coming up because the light is starting to pervade the sky. And what is the sun really, how do we know that the sun is there? Because of the light and because of the heat that the sun gives out. A tremendous amount of heat and light, in this way sustaining life. So in a similar way, each one of us is, this is part of the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita given in chapter 2. Each one of us is not the body, but we are the spirit soul, or the Atma within the body. This is called the self sometimes, the spirit soul. And the wonderful thing about it, that is our real identity. And even in this one body, we can understand. We've changed our body. Each of us can remember maybe when we were 7, 8, certainly maybe sometimes 5. I remember a few things. And then you just go through it. There's some highlights as we go. It's not any mystery. Everyone's gotten older, passing through, and the body's constantly changing. The mind is also changing. The mind is said to be the subtle body. We each have a mind, obviously. We also have a physical, gross body. So they're constantly changing, but the soul remains the same. And in the second chapter, Krishna speaks a verse that kind of sums up the whole philosophy about the soul. Jayate mriyate va kadachan nayam bhut va bhavitava nabuya ajo nitya shastratoyam purano nahanyate hanamani sharire. It means for the soul there is never birth and there is never death. It doesn't come into being, doesn't go out of being. All the souls who are as eternal as God is. We're unborn. Aja, nitya, eternal, ever-existing, primeval. We are not slain when the body is slain. We don't have any demise. So, what is the nature of that soul? That's explained in the 15th chapter. Mamai vangsha jiva loka jiva bhuta sanatana. That the living entities, sometimes probably called living entity, the Atma, the soul, is my part and parcel. This word anksha in Sanskrit. It's very analogous to, say we go down to the beach here, we take a glass of seawater. So that glass of seawater, or indeed any drop in that glass, has the same chemical properties, say, of the big ocean. It's got a little salt and whatever else is in there. It's all dissolved. So in one sense, it's very similar to the ocean in quality, but obviously way, way different in quantity. So same thing with the sun and the sun ray. Each sun ray has a little bit of light, a little bit of heat. But the sun has practically unlimited light and heat. So similarly, God is the supremely conscious being. And He's, as explained in this chapter, He's all-pervading. This is a quality that Western theologians have long attributed to God. Omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence. He knows everything, He's present everywhere, and He's all-powerful. And this may lead, this is a slight off the topic, this leads to a problem if you don't understand that the soul is also eternal and we transmigrate. And that is the question, is it even a whole section of theology called theodicy? I don't know if you're familiar, you know that. the problem of evil, right? So, okay, so you're positing a all-merciful, all-powerful God. Then why do we see innocent little children suffering so much, sometimes in war, or from disease, or poverty, or something? Well, how can you explain that? I remember, it's a rhetorical question. I remember my brother, I have an elder brother, And I tried to introduce him to this philosophy. And he came back at me and said, well, as far as I'm concerned, because we come from a Jewish background, as far as I'm concerned, the Holocaust obviates any existence of God. All those millions and millions of innocent people suffering, and your all-merciful, all-powerful God didn't raise a finger? I don't believe him. I don't believe it exists like that. But if you understand the eternality of the soul, that we have occupied uncounted bodies before, and that in the activities that we perform in those bodies have certain effects. When we do good works, we're kind to people, we're generous, we're self-sacrificing, that's good karma. And we enjoy the fruits of that in this life or in a future life. In other words, that gives us more comforts in life. Conversely, if we're nasty, we're cruel, sociopaths, then that's going to also come back at us. And in fact, the science of transmigration says that human life is not a given. Once you become a human being, you can also go down again if you act viciously, if you don't adhere to the laws of God, basically. So this is the assumption here. Krishna has also spoken about this several times in the Bhagavad Gita earlier. So he's speaking now and simply illuminating how the soul, which he's mentioned before, that the soul is all pervading within the body, and is kind of carried through the bloodstream, the consciousness. That's why your fingernails in your hair, you can cut them, it doesn't hurt, But if you happen to cut a little bit too close, oh, ouch, and a little blood may come. Because there's blood flow, and therefore the consciousness is there. So all this is part of the science of Bhakti Yoga. So what Krishna is giving us a nice analogy, that our consciousness is pervading our body. Not perfectly, we don't know exactly what's going on inside, but we have sensation all over, you're familiar with that. And especially through our developed brain, we can use our senses, we can use our rational thought, we can philosophize. Lower animals can't do that. The human life has a very important purpose, and that is to end this painful process of transmigration, because this is not natural for us. The philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and other books we have, Bhagavad Purana, which are the essence of the Vedic literature, enjoin the human being. I remember one of the first Sanskrit things I learned, I'm so familiar with these books. I've been working on these books. This is my service for the last 45 years. And so I picked up some of these verses. But the very first Sanskrit phrase I learned, some of you may even recognize this if you're familiar with the yoga studios, is Tamasi ma jyotirgama, asato ma sadgamaya, amrityum ma amritam gama. Which means, there's two ways of understanding the word ma. Ma can mean don't, or it can mean me. And one is a prayer, and one is an injunction. So Prabhupada would always take it as the injunction. Don't stay in darkness. Come to the light. Go to the light. Don't stay in the ever-changing, impermanent world of birth and death. Go to the Sat, the eternal spiritual world. Don't stay in this world of mrityu, which means death, and come to the eternal life of the spiritual kingdom of God. So, Krishna comes in order to help us on that quest, those who take this injunction seriously. Is there really a world where we don't have to die? Is there really a world that is not so fraught with what we call, there's no birth, old age, disease, and death, and there's no threefold miseries? This is another, serious aspect of the service. These we're very familiar with, but you may not have heard them in those terms. Difficulties or pains that arise from our own body and mind. Who hasn't experienced those? You're sitting in a room quietly. There's nobody bothering you. The weather is perfect. You got the air conditioning on, but you're in agony because your boyfriend left you, your girlfriend left you, or something. You have PTSD. You're carrying forward from your 6 terms in Afghanistan or wherever you were as a war veteran. A very moral injury, right? So your own body and mind can give you so much trouble. As you get older, The body naturally, what's that pain? Where's that coming from? I wasn't there before. So that's one. Then other living entities, let's face it, especially other people. I don't know, was it Sartre who wrote this play, No Exit? Yeah, I once read, did you ever read it? You're lucky. I don't remember much from it, but I remember one phrase, it stuck with me and it's very pertinent. He said, I forget who was saying this in the play, but it says, hell is other people, Can you imagine? But sometimes it's like that, So other people or other entities causing you trouble. And sometimes, as we see most dramatically in present day, the natural disturbances. You got the earthquakes, you got the hurricanes, you got the flooding, you got the drought. There's going to be a shortage of water right here now. The Colorado River is going down, as you may know. So you can't do anything about it. Whole civilizations have ended because of things like that. Suddenly the water dries up, you have to migrate. So this is what the material world is all about. If you're not suffering anything right now, which is possible, there are interludes, it might happen. So there's the anxiety of, how to ward it off. That's why I always point out, that's the insurance company is built on this fear something might happen. I periodically get, they know I'm old, they know so much about you from the things they just search on the internet, So every day, practically, I get, Haribo, Adriana. Some life insurance, life insurance. They're worried that I'll go and then people who depend on me will suffer. Therefore, let me get some life insurance. Life insurance, fire insurance, car insurance, health insurance. Also that I'll be ready. I'll ward off the threefold miseries, right? So this is what material life is like. But this is not what life has to be like. This is what the whole thing is that this is an unnatural situation for us. To have little periods where we enjoy, and then a lot of work to try to set it up and worry and eventually get old and the whole thing collapses. This is what goes on millions of times, for everybody. So then we ask the question, is this all there is? And Bhagavad Gita in the book says, no, this is not all there is. This is not all there is to life. That life is spirit, is consciousness. And our original home, as Srila Prabhupada would famously say, we want to go back home, back to Godhead. And there is, believe it or not, it takes some faith. This is the eternal life, and there's no suffering there. In fact, one of the names of the spiritual world is Vaikunta, the place without anxiety. Just imagine. When this place, if we're without anxiety, it means we're not, famously, we're not paying attention. We've done things to forget these threefold miseries, birth and death, old age and disease. This is called Maya. Maya means that which isn't. Maya is the material energy that bewilders us into thinking that we can find a place of happiness and security here, And when material energy impinges on that, and then we'll do something, some intense pleasure or something, intoxication or something, so we'll forget. And in that forgetfulness, that'll be our happiness. But it's such a, it's tragic really, that the living being, which by birthright belongs in the spiritual world, no birth, no death, eternal life, happiness, is now settling for this life in this world. So Krishna consciousness, and this is not coming from me. The speaker of this book, of course, is Krishna himself. But Srila Prabhupada, he wrote these purports, and he had realized the truth of all these things. For us, it may be a little theoretical, although the fact that we're not the body, that we can understand just by logic. Krishna has at the beginning of his instructions, he says to Arjuna, Dehinosmin yata dehi kaumaram yovanam jara tata dehandara prapti dhirastattanamuyati. And this is what I was giving before, how just as the living entity passes through different bodies, childhood, the adolescence, youth, middle age, old age. Similarly, the living entity gets another body at death. Now, these are all different bodies. The body I have now, it may peripherally resemble the body I had when I was 16 years old, but it's definitely changed. I can feel that it's changed. My mind has certainly changed. So what hasn't changed? The soul. I am the knower of the body. Arjuna began this chapter. We're almost through with the chapter. It's the second to last verse. We'll finish tonight. Asking 6 questions. He wanted Krishna to clear up what is Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti means nature. We're completely familiar with it. We just don't know the name in Sanskrit. Material nature. The solid matter, the liquids, the gases, the space, the illuminating fire and electricity. And then the subtle nature, which we may not think of as such, which is the mind and intelligence and even the ego. These are material things, more and more subtle. These are the building blocks of our world, both our body as well as the world outside. So Krishna enumerates those in the 7th chapter, and then he explains there's a superior energy. This is the inferior energy. What's the quality? Unconscious. All these things around us are unconscious. We ourselves are consciousness. The body itself is also made of these elements. And once, as Prabhupada points out in the purport, once the soul leaves, because the body is just a very complex, amazing machine. It's an incredible machine. And just the very fact of how intricately it's put together. I remember when I was growing up, and I'd get chicken pox, this and that, and my mother would always be taking my temperature. And I learned that the normal temperature is 98.6. Not 98.5, not 98.7, 98.6. Now, it didn't dawn on me, how that's evidence of an intelligence behind it, regulating the bodily temperature and all these different things. But when I worked in the hospital for about a year, before I joined in 73, this was 1972, and I remember I would take a break sometime, and they had this, you imagine how far medicine has come since then, 50 years practically. But then they had a little library you could go, and they had various periodicals. And they had such specialties, someone's in the kidney, weekly, and then there's the heart, many heart magazines, and so many different things. And research was going on all the time. They're discovering new things. And, but still, there's always more to understand how the brain works, how these different things. Now they think, they assure us they've figured out how old age happens, and we can reverse it. So don't worry, just give us $10,000 a month, and you'll be young again, But the point I'm making is incredibly intricate, and it's all working together. And when you think about it, that in itself is an evidence of a high intelligence. How did this creation take place? Not just the human bodies, but all the different organisms and the way that everything's working on time. So this argument from design, this is also in Western theology, and it's a good argument. It certainly should lead us into investigating whether there is a God or not just writing it off. So Bhagavad Gita clearly is of the opinion that there's a God, and Krishna is the speaker, and he's encouraging us. He's encouraging us to turn our attention toward the process by which this becomes revealed. In other words, this is all covered. Like I say for the prayer, Om Jnana Timirandasya, I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. What is that knowledge? We're reading it here. Bhagavad Gita and all of the books that he draws on to write his little commentaries here. And a whole line of realized spiritual masters. This is, and what's the first value of having that, be aware of that? That here's these towering intellects who believed all this, practiced the process, and realized it, and lived lives of supreme virtue, and gave us their association through their books and Srila Prabhupada personally, and showed us a different way of living in this world that's not based on trying to exploit the senses, but based on living the divine life, seeing God everywhere, and experiencing the bliss that comes from service to God. That's what bhakti is all about. Bhakti is not just service to God, it's service and experiencing the reciprocation. Bhakti is the exchange of love. It's not just loving service, because Krishna is there. He's the living being. So all of these great souls have said, yes, this is real. And so it behooves us to at least try the experiment, chant, practice the process, and see if you're also experiencing it. And it works every time. So this verse is again giving us a wonderful analogy, and we're illuminating this body, but our real illumination comes, or enlightenment comes, when we transcend the limitations of the body and we break out of this imprisonment of material energy, and we experience again the spiritual energy. That's not only there, but it's also within each of us. It's all pervading. So I'm going to stop there on this verse before we finish the chapter. Are there any local questions? We have a visitor every night almost every night from Portugal, Zoom. So if he's not, he may chime in if he's online. Any questions or comments? We have some first timers. Oh, use the mic. Yeah, because we have people. Some of them in Texas, some of them here. On? It's on.
So I was thinking, the intelligent design. This has been bandied about a lot. How can we look at this and not think there's an intelligence behind it? I started to read a while back one of Stephen Hawking's books, and he talked about this great singularity, that literally something came from nothing. I'm trying to imagine, how do you get something from nothing? There's no free lunch. How do you get... And out of this something that came from nothing came the Big Bang and came this whole thing. Really? I'm supposed to believe that? As opposed to that there's an intelligence behind this that existed before any bang or any explosion? And Hawking was an intelligent man. I really wonder how he came up. How did he get that?
And isn't it true that, I mean, he had such esteem, right? And so that his believing it, and he's not the first one, gives credence to it, and somehow it's true.
I mean, that's no more. I mean, the critics of intelligent design say, well, that it just happens. Yeah, how does that work? It just came. You got something. You got this whole universe from absolutely nothing, a singularity in the black void of space. How does that work?
Yeah, and then I just heard Prabhupada discussing it in a talk, and so maybe that's one theory. But in other words, there was a primordial chunk, and there was a big bang explosion, and everything came. But who has any experience of a big explosion producing finely intricate, machines like all these bodies and organisms? It doesn't compute, Yeah. It's the evidence. It's the effort to deny any basis for ultimate morality.
Is that they have come up with this theories because they have some evidence that the universe is expanding, so they extrapolated it too much to the point to say that okay, so it must be expanding from really small object or something, a dot or something. So that's how they are trying to.
So they spool the expanding back to zero, and they come up with nothing, and then it's expanding. Which is more believable? Okay, so let's go on, unless we have any remote questions. Then we'll have maybe a little review of the chapter. Text 35. Chaitra gayor evam antaram jnana chakshusha bhuta prakriti moksham cha ye vidur yanti te param. Those who see with eyes of knowledge the difference between the body and the knower of the body, and can also understand the process of liberation from bondage in material nature, attain to the supreme goal. Purport. The purport of this 13th chapter is that one should know the distinction between the body, the owner of the body, and the supersoul. One should recognize the process of liberation as described in verses 8 through 12. Then one can go on to the supreme destination. A faithful person should first have some good association to hear of God and thus gradually become enlightened. If one accepts a spiritual master, one can learn to distinguish between matter and spirit, and that becomes the stepping stone for further spiritual realization. A spiritual master, by various instructions, teaches his students to get free from the material concept of life. For instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, we find Krishna instructing Arjuna to free him from materialistic considerations. One can understand that this body is matter. It can be analyzed with its 24 elements. The body is the gross manifestation, and the subtle manifestation is the mind and psychological effects. And the symptoms of life are the interaction of these features. But over and above this, there is the soul, and there is also the supersoul. The soul and the supersoul are two. This material world is working by the conjunction of the soul and the 24 material elements. One who can see the constitution of the whole material manifestation as this combination of the soul and material elements, and can also see the situation of the Supreme Soul, becomes eligible for transfer to the spiritual world. These things are meant for contemplation and for realization, and one should have a complete understanding of this chapter with the help of the spiritual master. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 13th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness. So just a note on these 24. I mentioned chapter 7. There's a list of 8 material elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. So then to come up to 24, you also have the senses. The senses are, we're familiar with the 5 senses, what we call the Gyanendriya, the eyes and the nose and the sense of taste and touch and hearing. But there's also active senses, the hands, the legs, the voice, and excretory and generative organs. So that makes another 10. That brings it up to 18. And then you also have the 5 sense objects, the fragrances and the sounds and all these different things. So that brings it up to 23. And then sometimes the 24th element is said to be the super soul or contaminated consciousness. But all of these are kind of the raw materials that we have to work with. And each of us is living within those, interacting with them, and forming a certain consciousness from how we interact. And that consciousness, as explained very clearly in chapter 8 and again in chapter 15, is the template for our next birth. We are eternal. We've had many births before, and we'll have ones in the future. Hopefully just one, our spiritual body. But whatever it is, we're formulating that body now by what we do, by our activities, by our association, by what we choose to do with our time. And that's very encouraging, because it means that we have freedom, that we're not just agents here, helpless, but according to what we decide to do, and because we have human intelligence, we can decide not to simply obey the demands and the impulses of the senses or the mind, but we can act according to philosophy or intelligence or instructions here from the spiritual master or guru, from the shastra, and therefore change the whole destiny that we're leading toward. This is the purpose. It's a very serious thing. What could be a more serious topic than that? You know? And the wonderful thing about bhakti yoga, especially as taught in the present age, is that it's very joyful and easy to perform. Krishna, in the 6th chapter, he gives a little bit of an insight into a much more difficult process. It's an authorized process. We have maybe a shadow of it in the yoga studios. I also did yoga, hatha yoga. It's very good for you. We had a little meditation. We had some pranayama meditation, meditating on Om, you know. But Krishna gives the real process, and it's called Ashtanga, means 8 limbs. And it starts with yama niyama. Yama are the don'ts, things that you can't do. Now in the Ashtanga process, the Raja Yoga, is the first thing, there's no sex involved at all. Bhakti Yoga is not like that. There are householders. There are many householders who have children and so forth, but they're great devotees. But this Ashtanga Yoga, the whole point is to completely separate yourself from any hint of sense gratification or this involvement. So yama is things you have to give up. Niyama are moral practices you have to take on. Then there's the famous asana, you know, sitting. We're all sitting down, but this is like back straight like this. Go alone. You have to go alone to the Himalayas, a cave somewhere. You know, you can't do it in the middle of a big city, half an hour twice a week. You know, it doesn't work like that. So you go alone. There's people who do this. There are yogis now in the Himalayas They appear during the Kumbh Mela. Sometimes they come down. I just saw a photograph, the recent Kumbh Mela. And there they are, and Prabhupada, he lived in Allahabad, which is where they have the huge Kumbh Mela. Millions come. Have you heard about that? And so some of them are real life yogis. They've been living in the Himalayas, and they look maybe 50 years old, but they could be over 100 or 200 years old. They slow down. I mean, this is real. They slow down the metabolism through breathing and all these different things. It's possible to do that. So, but how many can do that? You know, who's willing to? The process of real self-realization should be available to everybody. Everybody needs it. So Krishna is teaching a process that even Arjuna rejects. He says, no, this is not possible. Now, Arjuna is a contemporary of Krishna. He's a great soul. But he's saying, the mind is too powerful. To control it in this way is like trying to control a hurricane. And so he says, I can't do it. So Krishna says, yes, you can. Through practice, you can do it. So Arjuna says, okay, but what if I fail? In other words, he's not very optimistic. He says, well, then the next life, you can begin again. In other words, nothing is lost. You take birth in maybe a yogi family, whatever like that. So at the end of the chapter, Krishna says to Arjuna, who's after all an intimate associate of Krishna, he says, the best yogis, yogi nama visarvesham magaten antaratmana, Shraddhavan bhajate omam samayuktatamomataha. Now he uses the word bhaja there, which is related to bhakti. The greatest yogis are those who are always thinking of me with great faith and love. They're way beyond these yogis who are artificially trying to control the mind. So Krishna consciousness, because remember, we're awakening our original state. We're coming back to normal. All of this is abnormal. All of this old age, disease, death, this pandemic. This is not where we belong. So because we're coming back to our normal stage, therefore the process is very natural and joyfully performed. There's so much singing and dancing, feasting on prasadam, and beautiful deities, artwork, and music and plays. We don't have much of that here, but that's part of it. Drama. Everything can be used to help awaken our original God consciousness. So especially, I should mention the most merciful and munificent avatar of Krishna, and that is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared just 500 years ago. He's a historical figure, 535 now or so. And he's the one who started this chanting and dancing, because in this age, there's different ages, just like seasons. So we're in the Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is not very conducive to meditation and self-realization. It gets more and more degrading, and eventually it cycles back to the Satya Yuga, where people are much more peaceful and practice yoga and like that. But we're in an age, I think you can tell, there's so much dissension. Kali literally means quarrel and fighting. So isn't that what's going on everywhere? And so what process can be effective in this age? And the answer is the process centered on the chanting of this mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra. It's not concocted by Lord Chaitanya or anyone else. It's in the Upanishads. It says Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Iti Shodashakam Nam Kali Kalmasha Nashanam Natak Parataropaya Sabhavedesha Drishyate. These 16 names, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, in that form. Sometimes it's Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, but once you start chanting, it doesn't matter. It just flows. Right? You are the best way to counteract the evils of this age. In other words, it's so powerful, a meditation form, that even if you're not trained, your mind is all over the place, if you start the process of chanting sincerely, especially in congregation, then you quickly experience the transcendence. It may be only a hint of something, but it's something going on here. This is not, and you come away feeling better. There's something there. And so, in conjunction with prasadam, spiritual food, and good association, the deities, the books, is possible. And it's proven by the fact that this movement exists all over the world. Like many of the people sitting in the corner there, these are our new recruits, more or less, in different stages. They didn't grow up in devotee families, you know. But somehow they got a book, they started chanting, and now they're very blissful. They didn't always look like that either, I can tell you that for sure. They're looking much more brighter and joyful. But I was, totally, I mean, I like to point out, I was raised, I have to confess, as an orthodox communist. My father grew up in the 30s. He was very active in the labor movement in New York and politically involved. And at that time, for the right people, they thought, oh, the Russian Revolution, that's really going to happen, take over, So every night, for some time, he'd sit me down at the kitchen table, and pull out he'd hid it because the FBI, he thought it was the FBI was after him. He pulled out the capital of the copy of Das Kapital, in English, of course, and he would start teaching me, And the funny thing is, I remember very little of it, but I remember one slogan that I said, hey, this is just what we're doing now in the Hare Krishna ashram. And that was, from each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. You remember that? And I said, yes, from each according to his abilities, each according to his needs. And factually, that's the ideal of varnashram, is that you have a certain psychophysical nature and you work according to that. And you're provided with what you need. And when Krishna is in the center and you're experiencing spiritual bliss and happiness, you're satisfied where you are. Even those at the bottom of the social scale, the manual laborers, but they're getting a good dose of Krishna consciousness. There's big festivals. And when I'm telling you, I experienced this. First time I went to Mayapur. Mayapur is one of our main centers of pilgrimage. It's in about 100 miles north of Calcutta. This is where Lord Chaitanya appeared. Big temple going up there. A multi-million temple. $1 million temple. It's amazing. For the last 10 years. So, but I went when it was just rudimentary. There was a few buildings there, and but there were devotees from all over the world, and especially in subsequent years when I went, we see the Chinese and the Russian contingent, and after a while they would far outnumber the Americans. It's a lot easier to get to Calcutta from Russia and China than it is from L.A. It's like 10,000 miles. So gradually it would be more and more. But it was a true United Nations. And you'd be, what we do, chant and dance, And you would see, and during that time, you would feel, you would lose the sense. So this is a Russian guy, this is a Chinese. It didn't matter. It's really a true United Nations on the spiritual platform. So that is feasible to be done, and it inevitably works, and it's possible to do. And in this age, it's the process prescribed. So I'll give you one of my little verses. First in Sanskrit. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, kalo nastyeva, nastyeva, nastyeva gataranyata. If you want to achieve the supreme goal of life in this age, when dissension and chaos abound, there is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way that can ever be found but to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name, that to chant Krishna's name with a stout-hearted vow, and to pray, O Lord Krishna, O friend of the poor, that my head ever under your lotus feet bow. So we have a little time for review. If there are any other questions or comments, otherwise we'll have a little review of this chapter. Very important chapter. Okay, so it looks like Vijay Krishna is elsewhere tonight.
I had a question.
Oh, you have a question? Go ahead,
and at the end of that poem you said, what hearted vow?
Stout-hearted.
Stout-hearted vow?
Stout-hearted,
That's
right.
what you said.
Very determined.
It's actually the last two sentences in the purport of the final text here. And like the last sentence, these things are meant for contemplation and for realization, and one should have a complete understanding of this chapter with the help of the spiritual master.
Yes.
So it seems like all of the Gita is meant for contemplation, and then we're experiencing Prabhupada's realization because he's a realized soul.
The purports is how he's helping us. Yes.
So then in our humble heart, we think, oh, maybe I have some realization because he's elucidating it, and he's passing on the realization of all his spiritual masters.
Of course.
In his purports. Yeah. So but then he hits us with this whammy of, and then you should also have complete understanding of this chapter with the help of a spiritual master. So I'm kind of wondering how that combination works. Like we can contemplate and have some realization from this, but then also it says we should have a complete understanding of this chapter with the help of spiritual master?
Well, it's not, they're working together. You know, it's not one or the other, or one and then. These things are meant for contemplation, for realization. Though the contemplation is you're in the class, you're contemplating it, right? And they're meant for realization. Well, for full realization, we're hoping that will eventually be, and will actually perceive the super soul in the heart along with the soul, right, as Krishna describes. So that's to come. And one should have a complete understanding of this chapter with the help of the spiritual master. So he's encouraging us to study it, take notes. Where's our note taker over there? He probably took some notes tonight. And in other words, he's just encouraging us to read, attend a class, think about it, and attain realization of it. I don't think it's not any one than the other, and how it can.
I guess my question is, how does the spiritual master help us achieve complete understanding beyond our own contemplation and realization? How come he's adding that?
Well, it's like, imagine. Okay, forget a minute that we're in a Hare Krishna temple. When you go to school, say college, isn't what you do? You read the book, you contemplate it, you have some questions, and you come to the teacher when you come to the class and maybe bring the questions, and then that's answered, and light goes on, and that's the realization. It's a process, universal process of one imparting knowledge to the other. But the difference is that you're undergoing a transformation of consciousness. It's not like that you get a degree or something, and now I know chemistry. Because Krishna is in the heart. In other words, the super soul is also giving you enlightenment. Once you start on this path sincerely, you have all kinds of people trying to help you, beginning with Krishna from within the heart. And then because we can't perceive so well, he comes outside as the spiritual master and so forth. So just keep doing what you do. You're doing the right thing. All right, so let's okay, it's a little too late, and then maybe we'll have it tomorrow. So I'll give you a few of my poems. I was thinking of one today. I didn't have a chance to review it entirely, but there's a little poem, Ashtaka, 8-verse poem by Vallabhacharya called the Madhurashtaka. And it's something like that verse, Madhuram Madhuram Babadasya Vibho Madhuram Madhuram Vadanam Madhuram Madhugandi Madhusmita Tadaho Madhuram 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 Madhuram. Sweet, sweet is my dear Lord's form, sweet is still his face so fair, but his honey-scented gentle smile is sweet beyond compare. So he may, I'm not sure, he's definitely after Bilvamangal Thakur. And so he may have picked up on that. He wrote 8 verses of sweet, sweet. So I did an English one. So this is pretty easy. If you don't have, all you have to do is rhyme the word sweet, sweet, sweet. So it starts like this. I don't have all of them memorized. If you're interested, I can send it to you. His lotus feet and hands are sweet. His waist and lotus navel sweet. His threefold bending pose is sweet. The king of sweet is sweet complete. His lips are sweet. His smile is sweet. His lotus eyes and face is sweet. His heart is sweet. His name is sweet. The king of sweet is sweet complete. So it's kind of internal, but the idea is that in the ultimate issue, God is the most attractive person, and because he's infinite, he can have a intimate, loving relationship with each one of us. You can't do that on the material plane. So much pain is there where you fall in love, and then the other person finds someone else, and oh my God, my whole life is ruined. But it's not like that with Krishna. The more that you're able to uncover your relationship with him, you'll feel you have a personal relationship. We have millions and millions and trillions. So this is what we're looking for. We're looking for that unbroken, ever fresh, loving relationship with all kinds of activities and ways in which we can express and experience that love. And that's what Krishna is offering us. That's what the spiritual world is all about. And so we've been given a way, a simple, an easy way, a feasible way, let's put it that way, because there are obstructions that we have to overcome. But it's feasible through the chanting and the hearing and worshipping the deity that we can do this.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Is that the Adharam Madhuram Madhuradipate Akhilam Madhur? Is that the one?
Yeah, Madhuradipate Akhilam Madhuram.
Akhilam Madhuram.
Yeah, that's the last line. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The Emperor of
Krishna,
Sweetness.
next.
Yeah, this is
Yes,
Dhanabari. She's one of our very sincere devotee. She's always attends class at home, but she's always there on Zoom. All right, so we're going to adjourn, and then we'll get ready to have a kirtan. Hopefully you can stay. You'll see the deities, and we'll have a Hare Krishna kirtan. And we have a pretty good crowd. We can really work it up today if you stay. Are you going to stay, Adriana? Yeah. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.